Princess Isabella stood at the tall windows of Rosewood Palace, watching the morning mist roll across the gardens. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the private letter that had arrived just minutes before. The royal seal was broken, and the words inside had changed everything she thought she knew about her life. The kingdom of Eldoria had always been peaceful under King Alexander's rule. Princess Isabella, his eldest daughter, was beloved by the people for her kindness and dedication to charity work. At 28, she had recently married Prince Marcus from the neighboring kingdom of Valmont. Their wedding 6 months ago had been celebrated across both nations as a union that would bring lasting peace. But now, as Isabella read the letter again, her world felt like it was crumbling. The message was from Dr. Helena Winters, the royal physician who had served the family for over 15 years. The doctor's handwriting was usually neat and precise, but today it seemed hurried, almost desperate. "Your Highness," the letter began, "I must speak with you privately, before the morning council meeting. What I have discovered cannot be discussed through normal channels. The blood tests we conducted last month have revealed something that could shake the very foundation of the royal family. I fear for what this means for the kingdom, and especially for your children." Isabella's 2 young sons, Prince William, age 4, and Prince James, age 2, were playing in the nursery just down the hall. Their innocent laughter echoed through the palace corridors, a sharp contrast to the fear growing in her heart. What could Dr. Winters have found that was so serious? The princess had agreed to the blood tests as part of a routine health screening that all royal family members underwent annually. It was supposed to be simple. Nothing more than checking for any hereditary conditions that might affect future generations. The royal bloodline had always been strong, with no known genetic problems. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly folding the letter and slipping it into her dress pocket. Lady Margaret, her closest friend and lady-in-waiting, entered with a concerned expression. "Your Highness, you look pale. Are you feeling well?" Isabella forced a smile. "Just tired, Margaret. The children kept me up late last night." But Lady Margaret knew her too well. They had grown up together, and Margaret could always tell when something was troubling the princess. "Is it the meeting with the council today? I know they want to discuss the new trade agreements." "Perhaps," Isabella replied, though her mind was far from trade agreements. She needed to see Dr. Winters immediately, but the doctor's clinic was in the lower part of the palace, and getting there without drawing attention would be difficult. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Servants hurried through the hallways, preparing for the day's royal duties. Isabella watched them go about their normal routines, unaware that everything might be about to change. Prince Marcus appeared at the doorway, still dressed in his riding clothes from his morning exercise. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his usual warm smile faltered when he saw his wife's expression. "Isabella, what's wrong?" He crossed the room quickly, taking her hands in his. "You're shaking." She wanted to tell him everything, to share the burden of whatever Dr. Winters had discovered. But something in the letter's tone made her hesitate. The doctor had specifically requested to speak with her alone first. There had to be a reason for that. "I received a letter from Dr. Winters," she said carefully. "She wants to meet with me before the council session." Marcus frowned. "About what?" She didn't say exactly. Something about the recent health screenings. The prince's grip on her hands tightened slightly. "Isabella, if there's something wrong with your health, you know I'll support you through anything." His words were meant to comfort, but they only increased her anxiety. What if it wasn't about her health? What if it was about something much worse? A commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Quick footsteps and hushed voices suggested something urgent was happening. Lady Margaret appeared again at the door, this time with a worried expression. "Your Highness, Dr. Winters is here. She says it's extremely urgent." Isabella's heart raced. The doctor had come to her instead of waiting for Isabella to visit the clinic. This could only mean the situation was even more serious than she had imagined. "Send her in," Isabella said, her voice barely steady. Dr. Winters entered the room, her usually composed demeanor replaced by obvious distress. She was a woman in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back severely, and intelligent eyes that had seen many royal secrets over the years. Today, those eyes held something Isabella had never seen before: fear. "Your Highness," Dr. Winters said, glancing nervously at Prince Marcus and Lady Margaret. "I requested a private audience." Isabella looked at her husband and friend. "Please, give us a moment." Marcus hesitated, clearly wanting to stay. But he respected his wife's wishes. "I'll be in my study if you need me," he said, kissing her forehead gently before leaving with Lady Margaret. Once they were alone, Dr. Winters approached the princess with a manila folder clutched tightly in her hands. "Your Highness, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but you must know before anyone else does." Isabella sat down in one of the velvet armchairs by the fireplace, gesturing for the doctor to take the chair across from her. "Please, just tell me what you've found." Dr. Winters opened the folder with trembling fingers. "The blood tests revealed something unexpected about your family's genetic makeup. When I compared your results with the historical medical records of the royal family, I discovered a pattern that doesn't match what we've always believed." "What kind of pattern?" "Princess Isabella, according to these results, you and your brother, Prince Theodore, are not genetically related to King Alexander." The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. She felt the room spinning around her as she tried to process what the doctor had just said. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake in the tests." "I ran them 3 times to be certain," Dr. Winters said quietly. "I even had the samples tested at a private laboratory outside the kingdom to ensure accuracy. The results are conclusive. Thanks for watching." And last the first comment, see the quieter. The rambidation. And a lotto. The rambidation. The rambidation. The rambidation. The rambidation. Isabella's mind raced through the implications. If she and Theodore weren't Alexander's children, then they weren't legitimate heirs to the throne. Her own children's claim to succession would be questioned. The entire royal line of Eldoria could be thrown into chaos. "Does anyone else know about this?" she whispered. "No one. I came to you first, because I wasn't sure what to do with this information. But, Your Highness, there's more." Isabella's stomach dropped. "More?" "I found records of similar tests conducted 29 years ago, just before you were born. They were ordered by Queen Catherine herself, but the results were sealed and hidden in the palace archives. It appears your mother knew something was different about your birth." The mention of her mother, who had died when Isabella was only 10 years old, brought tears to her eyes. Queen Catherine had always been a mystery to her daughter, dying so young that Isabella barely remembered her. What did those old records show? Dr. Winters hesitated before answering. "They suggest that Queen Catherine had a relationship with someone other than the king around the time you and Prince Theodore were conceived. The genetic markers indicate that your biological father is someone else entirely." Isabella felt nauseous. Everything she had believed about her identity, her family, and her place in the world was crumbling. The weight of the crown she was destined to inherit suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Dr. Winters, if this information becomes public, it will destroy the kingdom. The people's faith in the royal family, the stability of our government. Everything will be questioned." "I understand, Your Highness. That's why I came to you first. But we must consider what to do next. King Alexander deserves to know the truth, and there are legal implications for the succession." Isabella stood up and walked back to the window, looking out at the kingdom she might not have the right to rule. In the distance, she could see the town where thousands of people lived their lives trusting in the stability of the royal family. How could she tell them that their future queen might not be a true heir? The sound of children's laughter drifted from the nursery again. Little William and James had no idea that their entire future had just been called into question. They were innocent in all of this, but they would bear the consequences of decisions made before they were born. "Doctor," Isabella said without turning around, "I need time to think about this. Can you keep this information confidential for now?" "Of course, Your Highness. But you should know that I'm not the only one with access to these medical records. If someone else decides to investigate the royal family's genetic history, they could discover the same information." The threat was clear. This secret wouldn't stay hidden forever. Isabella had to decide whether to reveal the truth herself or wait for someone else to expose it, potentially at the worst possible moment. As Dr. Winters prepared to leave, she turned back to the princess. "Your Highness, whatever you decide, remember that being royal isn't just about blood. You've served this kingdom with honor and dedication. The people love you for who you are, not just for your birthright." After the doctor left, Isabella remained at the window for a long time. The morning mist had cleared, revealing the beautiful landscape of Eldoria in all its glory. This was the kingdom she loved, the home she had always planned to protect and serve. Now she faced the possibility that she might not have the legal right to do so. The council meeting was scheduled to begin in 2 hours. Important decisions about trade and diplomacy would be made, decisions that would affect the future of the kingdom. But all Isabella could think about was how to tell her husband, her children, and her father that their family was built on a lie. She thought about her mother's final words to her, whispered on her deathbed. "Always remember, Isabella, that love makes a family stronger than blood ever could." At the time, 10-year-old Isabella hadn't understood what her mother meant. Now, those words took on a completely different meaning. The princess knew she had to make a choice that would define not just her own future, but the future of an entire kingdom. The truth was dangerous, but lies could be even more devastating if discovered at the wrong time. As she finally turned away from the window, Isabella whispered to herself the words that would haunt her for days to come. "How do I tell the children that everything they believe about their family might not be true?" The palace bells chimed 11 o'clock, signaling that the council meeting would begin soon. Isabella had 1 hour to decide whether to carry this burden alone, or to trust others with a secret that could destroy everything she held dear. Outside her door, the sounds of palace life continued normally. Servants chatted quietly as they worked. Guards changed shifts with practiced efficiency, and somewhere in the distance, her children played their innocent games. None of them knew that the foundation of their world had just shifted beneath their feet. Isabella closed her eyes and tried to find the strength that her mother had always told her lived within her. Queen Catherine had faced this same terrible knowledge and had chosen to keep it secret. Now her daughter had to decide whether that choice had been right, or whether it was time for the truth to finally come to light. The council meeting dragged on for what felt like hours. Princess Isabella sat beside her father, King Alexander, trying to focus on discussions about wheat exports and maritime trade routes. But her mind kept drifting to the devastating secret locked away in her heart. Every time she looked at the king's weathered but kind face, she felt a stab of guilt mixed with confusion. King Alexander had raised her with love and pride, never showing any sign that he suspected she might not be his biological daughter. He spoke about trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had ruled justly for 30 years. How could she possibly destroy this man with the truth? Prince Theodore, her younger brother by 2 years, sat across the table taking notes on the discussion. At 26, he had always been the responsible one, preparing diligently for his eventual role in government. His dark hair and serious expression made him look remarkably like their father, though Isabella now wondered if that resemblance was just coincidence or wishful thinking. As the meeting concluded, King Alexander placed his hand on Isabella's shoulder. "You seem distracted today, my dear. Is everything well with the children?" The innocent question felt like a dagger. "Yes, father. William and James are wonderful as always." "Good. Family is everything, Isabella. Remember that." His words, meant to be comforting, only deepened her anguish. After the council members dispersed, Isabella caught Prince Theodore in the hallway. They had always been close, sharing secrets and supporting each other through the pressures of royal life. If anyone deserved to know the truth, it was him. "Theodore, could we speak privately?" He noticed the tension in her voice immediately. "Of course. My study?" They walked in silence to his private office, a smaller, cozier room filled with books and maps. Theodore closed the door and turned to his sister with concern. "What's troubling you?" Isabella sat down heavily in one of his leather chairs. "What I'm about to tell you will change everything you believe about our family." Theodore's expression grew serious. "Go on." She told him everything Dr. Winters had revealed, watching as his face went through the same emotions she had experienced hours earlier. Shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, a hollow acceptance. "So we're not really royal." he said quietly after she finished. Everything we've been raised to believe. Everything we've prepared for. It's all been built on a lie. We don't know the full story yet, Isabella said, though her voice lacked conviction. There might be an explanation. Theodore stood and walked to his window, much as Isabella had done earlier. Father deserves to know, does he? Think about what this would do to him. He's loved us as his own children for our entire lives. And what about the kingdom? If this becomes public, it could cause civil war. But if we say nothing and someone else discovers the truth, it will be even worse. Isabella had been wrestling with this same dilemma all day. Dr. Winters said there were old medical records from when Mother was pregnant with us. Records that were sealed and hidden. What if Mother wanted this secret to stay buried? Then why did she have the tests done in the first place? It was a good question. One that had been nagging at Isabella. I think we need to find those old records. Maybe they contain answers about who our real father is. Or why Mother kept this secret. Theodore nodded slowly. The palace archives are in the lower levels. But accessing sealed royal records without authorization. I'm the heir to the throne, Isabella said with more confidence than she felt. I have the authority. That evening, after putting her children to bed with their usual bedtime stories, Isabella met Theodore in the narrow corridors that led to the palace archives. They had changed into simple dark clothes and carried only a small lantern to guide their way. The archives were dusty and filled with centuries of royal documents. They spent over an hour searching through filing cabinets and storage boxes before Theodore found a section marked with their mother's name and dates around their birth year. Here, he whispered, pulling out a folder marked with multiple royal seals. These have never been opened since they were filed. Isabella's hands shook as she broke the seals and opened the folder. Inside were medical reports, personal letters, and what appeared to be a diary entry in their mother's handwriting. The medical reports confirmed what Dr. Winters had told her, but it was the personal documents that revealed the full story. Queen Catherine had indeed had an affair during her marriage to King Alexander, but not for the reasons Isabella had imagined. According to the diary entries, King Alexander had been suffering from an illness that made it impossible for him to father children. The royal physicians had confirmed this privately, but the information was kept secret to protect the king's reputation and the stability of the throne. Queen Catherine's diary revealed her anguish over this situation. She loved her husband deeply, but felt enormous pressure from the royal council to produce heirs. After months of internal struggle, she had made the decision to secretly seek another father for her children, choosing someone she trusted completely. Listen to this, Isabella whispered, reading from one of the diary entries. Alexander knows the truth about the children's parentage, and he has given his blessing. We have agreed that this secret must never be revealed, not even to Isabella and Theodore. They will be raised as true royal heirs because Alexander's love for them makes them so. The biological father has agreed to remain silent forever and has left the kingdom to protect our family. Theodore stared at his sister in amazement. Father knew all along? Isabella continued reading. The man who fathered us was Captain James Hartwell, the head of the Royal Guard. Mother writes about how honorable and loyal he was, and how he agreed to help them because of his devotion to the crown. Captain Hartwell, Theodore repeated the name. I remember hearing stories about him when we were children. He was supposedly a war hero who left to serve in distant lands. He left to protect us, Isabella realized, and Father raised us as his own, knowing the truth from the beginning. The revelation should have been comforting, but it raised new questions. If King Alexander had known and accepted them as his heirs, why were the medical records showing genetic inconsistencies now? Had something changed? They found their answer in the final document in the folder. A letter addressed to them, written in their mother's hand, but never delivered. My dearest Isabella and Theodore, it began. If you are reading this, it means the truth about your birth has somehow been discovered. I pray this day never comes. But if it does, you must know that you were created from love, not deception. Your father, King Alexander, wanted children so desperately that he agreed to my proposal. Captain Hartwell was chosen not just for his honor, but because he possessed the same noble qualities that make a true king. You are royal not because of blood, but because you were raised with love, duty, and the highest principles of service to your people. Own with, 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 own with. The letter continued, explaining that Queen Catherine had hidden these documents as insurance, in case questions about the succession ever arose. She had hoped they would never be needed, but she wanted her children to understand the full truth if that day ever came. The kingdom needs strong leadership, the letter concluded. Alexander has taught you both to rule with wisdom and compassion. These qualities matter more than bloodlines. You have the right to rule not just because we chose you as heirs, but because you have proven yourselves worthy of the crown through your actions and character. Isabella felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she finished reading. Mother planned for this moment. She knew we might face this crisis someday. Theodore was quiet for a long moment. So Father has always known, and he still chose us as his heirs. The question now is whether we tell him that we know the truth. Before Isabella could answer, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside the archives. Quickly, they gathered the documents and extinguished their lantern, hiding in the shadows between the tall filing cabinets. The footsteps grew closer, and they could hear whispered voices. Someone else was coming to the archives in the middle of the night. Isabella's heart pounded as she realized they might not be the only ones searching for family secrets. Are you certain the documents are here? A man's voice asked. According to my source, Queen Catherine hid evidence about the royal bloodline in the old medical files. A second voice replied. If we can find proof that the current heirs are illegitimate, we can challenge the succession. Armand, Isabella and Theodore exchanged horrified looks. Someone was actively looking for the same information they had just discovered, but with malicious intent. They listened as the intruders began searching through files, getting closer to the section where Isabella and Theodore were hiding. The voices belonged to Lord William Blackwood, a member of the Royal Council who had always seemed ambitious, and another man they didn't recognize. The people are already questioning some of the king's recent decisions, Lord Blackwood was saying. If we can prove that Princess Isabella has no legitimate claim to the throne, we can propose an alternative succession that puts someone more suitable in line to rule. And you're certain you can manage the transition smoothly? The other man asked. With the right evidence and the right timing, yes. The princess is popular with the people, but popularity won't matter if her claim to the crown is proven false. Isabella felt sick listening to the plot unfold. These men weren't interested in the truth for noble reasons. They wanted to use it to seize power for themselves. The searchers were getting very close to their hiding spot. Isabella knew they had to act quickly. She grabbed Theodore's hand and gestured toward a side corridor that led to another exit from the archives. Moving as quietly as possible, they slipped away from their hiding place and made their way toward the door. Just as they reached the corridor, Isabella's foot knocked against a small filing cabinet, making a slight noise. The searching stopped immediately. What was that? Lord Blackwood's voice was sharp with suspicion. Probably just the building settling, the other man replied, but Isabella could hear them moving in their direction. She and Theodore ran quietly through the dark corridors, clutching the documents that contained their family's most guarded secrets. They didn't stop until they reached Isabella's private chambers, where they locked the door behind them and caught their breath. They're planning to expose us, Theodore said, his voice tight with anger. But not to protect the kingdom. To serve their own ambitions. Isabella sank into a chair, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. We have to tell Father immediately. If Lord Blackwood finds evidence and presents it to the public without context, it will look like we've been deceiving everyone. But what if Father already knows about Blackwood's investigation? What if he's been protecting us all these years, and we're about to force him to make an impossible choice? It was past midnight, but Isabella knew they couldn't wait until morning. Lord Blackwood and his accomplice might return to the archives, or they might already have found what they were looking for. The only way to protect their family and the kingdom was to speak with King Alexander immediately, and trust in the love that had guided their family for so long. We tell him tonight, Isabella decided. We show him Mother's letters, and let him know about the plot against us. Whatever happens, we face it together as a family. Theodore nodded in agreement. The way Mother and Father raised us to handle crises. As they prepared to wake the king with news that would change everything, Isabella thought about her children sleeping peacefully in the nursery. Tomorrow, she would have to find a way to explain to little William and James that their family was facing challenges they couldn't yet understand. But tonight, she had to trust that the love that had shaped her entire life would be strong enough to carry them through the storm ahead. The documents in her hands felt heavy with the weight of 28 years of secrets. But they also contained evidence of the love, sacrifice, and careful planning that had protected their family for decades. Whatever Lord Blackwood's intentions, he would discover that the royal family of Eldoria was stronger than he imagined. Held together by bonds that went far deeper than simple bloodlines. Outside her windows, the kingdom slept peacefully, unaware that their future was about to be decided in a midnight conversation between a father and his children. Armed with nothing but truth, love, and the courage to face whatever consequences lay ahead, King Alexander sat in his private study, still in his nightclothes. As Isabella and Theodore placed the documents before him on his desk, the room was lit only by the warm glow of the fireplace and a few candles, creating dancing shadows on the walls lined with books and portraits of previous rulers. "Father," Isabella began, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to tell you something that will be difficult to hear." The king looked at his children with the same gentle expression he had worn throughout their lives, though Isabella could see concern growing in his eyes. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. We always have." Theodore spoke first, explaining Dr. Winters's discovery and their decision to search the archives. As he talked, King Alexander's expression didn't change, but his hands grew still on the desk before him. When Theodore finished, Isabella opened their mother's diary to the entry about Captain Hartwell and began to read aloud. Only then did King Alexander's composure begin to crack, tears forming in his eyes as he heard his late wife's words spoken in his daughter's voice. "You found Catherine's letters," he said quietly when Isabella finished reading. "I wondered if you ever would." "So you knew we would discover the truth eventually?" Theodore asked. King Alexander stood and walked to the portrait of Queen Catherine that hung above the fireplace. "Your mother was the strongest person I ever knew. When the royal physicians told us I couldn't father children, I was ready to accept that our line would end with me. But Catherine refused to let the kingdom suffer because of my limitations." He turned back to face them. "She presented me with her plan about Captain Hartwell. And though it broke my heart, I knew it was the right decision for Eldoria. James Hartwell was the most honorable man I've ever known, and if my children had to inherit traits from someone other than me, I was glad it was from him." Isabella felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. "You never resented us? Never wished we were different?" "Resented you?" King Alexander's voice was incredulous. "You two have been the greatest joy of my life. You've grown into exactly the kind of leaders this kingdom needs. Blood didn't make you my children. Love did." Theodore cleared his throat. "Father, there's something else. We overheard Lord Blackwood in the archives tonight. He's actively searching for evidence about our parentage, but he wants to use it to challenge the succession for his own benefit." The king's expression darkened. "William Blackwood has always been ambitious. I've been watching him carefully for months." "You knew about his investigation?" Isabella asked. "I suspected he was planning something. He's been asking too many questions about old royal records and making subtle comments about the stability of the current succession line." King Alexander returned to his seat, his manner becoming more businesslike. "What we need to determine now is how much evidence he's actually found and what he plans to do with it." Isabella realized that her father had been dealing with this threat much longer than she had known. "What are our options?" "We have several choices," the king replied. "We could confront Blackwood directly and try to neutralize his threat privately. We could reveal the truth ourselves, on our own terms, before he has a chance to use it against us. Or we could wait and see what evidence he actually has, then respond accordingly." Theodore frowned. Each option has serious risks. Yes. But doing nothing isn't really an option at this point. King Alexander picked up one of Queen Catherine's letters. Your mother wrote something else that you might not have found yet. She left specific instructions for what to do if this day ever came. He walked to his personal safe, hidden behind another portrait, and retrieved a sealed envelope. She gave this to me just before she died, with instructions to open it only if the truth about your parentage was ever discovered. Isabella and Theodore watched as their father broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. King Alexander read silently for a moment, then looked up with something like relief on his face. Catherine planned for this exact scenario. She knew that ambitious people might try to use the truth about your birth against our family someday. He handed the letter to Isabella. Read the last paragraph aloud. Isabella found the section and began to read. If the truth about Isabella and Theodore's parentage is ever threatened to be used for political purposes, Alexander should remember that Captain Hartwell left behind his own written testimony about our arrangement. This document, along with medical records and Alexander's written consent to our plan, will prove that the children were legitimate heirs by law and by choice. The evidence is hidden in the chapel vault, behind the altar stone marked with our family crest. Mother documented everything, Theodore said with amazement. She was protecting you. Even after her death, King Alexander confirmed. With that evidence, we can prove that your claim to the throne is legally sound, even without biological parentage. More importantly, we can show that this was a decision made with full knowledge and consent, not a deception. Isabella felt a surge of determination. Then we need to retrieve those documents before Blackwood finds them. Agreed. But we also need to decide how to handle this situation moving forward. The king looked at each of his children seriously. Are you prepared for the possibility that this information might become public? It will change how some people see you. And there will be those who question your right to rule regardless of the legal documentation. Isabella thought about her young sons, sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware that their futures were being decided in this quiet room. Father, what matters most to me is protecting this family and serving the kingdom honorably. If the truth needs to come out to achieve that, then so be it. Theodore nodded in agreement. We'll face whatever consequences come from honesty, rather than live with the fear of being exposed by our enemies. King Alexander smiled with obvious pride. That's exactly what your mother hoped you would say. They spent the next hour developing a plan. The king would approach Lord Blackwood privately the next morning, giving him a chance to abandon his scheme voluntarily. Meanwhile, Isabella and Theodore would retrieve Queen Catherine's hidden documents from the chapel vault. If Blackwood refused to stop his investigation, they would be prepared to reveal the truth themselves, with full documentation and a clear explanation of the circumstances. Just before dawn, Isabella and Theodore made their way to the palace chapel, a beautiful stone building that had served the royal family for over 2 centuries. The altar stone bearing their family crest was easy to locate, and behind it, they found a hidden compartment containing exactly what their mother had promised. Captain Hartwell's testimony was written in careful script, explaining his agreement to help the royal family ensure the succession. He described King Alexander as the most honorable ruler I have ever served, and expressed his pride in playing a role in providing Eldoria with future leaders. Medical documents confirmed the king's condition and showed that the arrangement had been made with full medical supervision and legal oversight. Most importantly, they found a formal adoption document, signed by King Alexander and witnessed by 3 high-ranking officials, legally establishing Isabella and Theodore as his heirs, regardless of biological parentage. The document had been kept secret to protect the family's privacy, but it provided ironclad legal protection for their claim to the throne. Mother thought of everything, Isabella said as they gathered the documents. She turned a potential weakness into unshakable strength. When they returned to the palace, they found King Alexander waiting for them with news about his confrontation with Lord Blackwood. I gave him the opportunity to explain his actions, the king reported. He initially tried to deny everything, but when I presented specific details about his nighttime visits to the archives, he admitted to his investigation. What did he say when you confronted him about his motives? Theodore asked. He claimed he was acting in the kingdom's best interests, ensuring the legitimacy of the succession. But when I offered to show him the legal documents proving your legitimate status as heirs, he became angry and revealed his true intentions. Isabella felt a chill. What did he say? He accused me of living a lie and said the people deserved a truly royal bloodline on the throne. When I pointed out that royal bloodlines mean nothing without the character to lead wisely, he suggested that perhaps it was time for new leadership entirely. The implication was clear. Lord Blackwood wasn't just challenging Isabella and Theodore's claim to the throne. He was questioning King Alexander's continued rule as well. He's planning a more serious rebellion than we thought, Theodore realized. Yes, but now we're prepared for it. King Alexander gestured to the documents they had retrieved. We have evidence that our family has always acted legally and in the kingdom's best interests. More importantly, we have the truth on our side. That afternoon, Lord Blackwood made his move. He called for an emergency session of the Royal Council, claiming to have discovered evidence of fraud in the royal succession. When the council members gathered, Blackwood dramatically presented photocopies of some of the medical records he had found, arguing that Princess Isabella and Prince Theodore had no legitimate claim to rule. But King Alexander was ready for him. Rising calmly from his throne, the king addressed the assembled council members with quiet dignity. Lord Blackwood has indeed discovered information about my family that we have kept private for many years. However, he has only part of the story, and his interpretation of that information is both incorrect and malicious. The king then presented the full documentation, including Captain Hartwell's testimony, the medical records explaining the necessity of the arrangement, and most importantly, the legal adoption papers that established Isabella and Theodore as legitimate heirs. My wife and I faced a personal challenge that threatened the stability of our kingdom's future, King Alexander explained. We solved that challenge through careful planning, full legal compliance, and the help of one of the most honorable men ever to serve this crown. Our children have been raised with love, trained with care, and have proven themselves worthy leaders through their actions and character. The council members listened in stunned silence as the king continued. The question before us today is not whether Princess Isabella and Prince Theodore have the right to inherit the throne. The legal documents prove that they do. The question is whether we will allow ambitious individuals to use private family matters to create instability for their own political gain. Lord Blackwood attempted to argue that the people deserve to know the truth about their future rulers, but his argument fell apart when several council members pointed out that he had presented incomplete information and had failed to mention the legal legitimacy of the succession. The council voted unanimously to support the royal family and to censure Lord Blackwood for his reckless and self-serving actions. Faced with complete political isolation, Blackwood withdrew his accusations and quietly left the kingdom within a week. The crisis was over, but it had changed the royal family forever. That evening, Isabella and Theodore sat with King Alexander in his study, processing everything that had happened. I'm proud of how you both handled this situation, the king told them. You sought the truth, faced it honestly, and were prepared to accept whatever consequences came from doing the right thing. Isabella smiled. We learned from the best teachers. What do we tell our children about all this? Theodore asked. He had recently become engaged to Lady Elizabeth from a neighboring kingdom, and they were already discussing starting a family. We tell them the truth, in age-appropriate ways, Isabella replied. We explain that families come in many forms, but what matters is love, commitment, and service to others. King Alexander nodded. And we teach them that being royal isn't about bloodlines. It's about character, wisdom, and dedication to the people you serve. The next morning, Isabella found herself back at the window where this crisis had begun, watching her children play in the garden below. Prince Marcus had been told the full story the previous evening, and his response had been exactly what Isabella had hoped for. Complete support and a reminder that he had married her for who she was, not for her bloodline. Little Prince William ran up to his mother as she came outside to join them. Mama, Papa says you've been having important grown-up meetings. Is everything okay? Isabella knelt down to her son's level, looking into eyes that sparkled with intelligence and curiosity. Someday, she would tell him the full story of his family's history. For now, she could give him the most important truth of all. Everything is perfectly fine, my darling. Our family loves each other very much. and we always will. Sometimes grown-ups have to solve complicated problems, but we do it together. Like when Theodore and I solve puzzles together? 4-year-old William asked. Exactly like that, Isabella agreed, pulling both her sons into a hug. Later that day, Dr. Winters visited the palace to check on the family and to ensure that all the medical records had been properly secured. She found Princess Isabella in her private sitting room, looking more peaceful than she had in days. Your Highness, I want to apologize for the distress my discovery caused, Dr. Winters said. Isabella shook her head. Don't apologize, Doctor. You did exactly what you should have done. The truth needed to come to light eventually, and it was better that it happened on our terms rather than someone else's. And you're comfortable with how everything was resolved? More than comfortable, Isabella replied. I've learned that my family is even stronger than I thought. We faced our biggest fear and discovered that love really can overcome anything. 6 months later, Princess Isabella stood before the people of Eldoria during the annual Harvest Festival. The royal family had decided to share a carefully worded version of their story with the public, emphasizing the legal legitimacy of the succession and the strength that comes from facing challenges with honesty and unity. The people's response had been overwhelmingly positive. Rather than feeling deceived, they admired the royal family for their openness and were moved by the story of King Alexander's love for his children. Many citizens remarked that Isabella and Theodore's dedication to the kingdom proved they were worthy rulers regardless of their biological parentage. As Isabella addressed the crowd, she spotted her children in the front row, sitting with their grandfather and father. Prince William waved enthusiastically when he saw her looking at him, and little James clapped his hands with delight at all the pageantry around him. The greatest strength of Eldoria has always been our people, Isabella told the gathered crowd. Families who support each other through challenges, communities that work together for the common good, and citizens who believe that our best days lie ahead of us. Today we celebrate not just our harvest, but our unity as a kingdom built on love, service, and mutual respect. The crowd cheered, and Isabella felt a deep sense of peace. The secret that had once threatened to destroy her family had ultimately made them stronger. Her children would grow up knowing that they belonged to a family defined not by bloodlines, but by the unbreakable bonds of love and commitment. That evening, as she tucked Prince William and Prince James into bed, 4-year-old William asked her the question she had been expecting. Mama, will you tell us the story about grandfather and grandmother and the brave captain? Isabella smiled. Over the past months, she had begun sharing simplified versions of their family's history with her sons, framing it as a story about love, sacrifice, and the many different ways families can be created. Once upon a time, she began, settling into the comfortable chair beside their beds, there was a king who loved his kingdom so much that he was willing to do anything to ensure it would have wise and kind rulers in the future. As she told the story, Isabella realized that her children would grow up with something she had never had: the complete truth about their family, shared with love and pride rather than hidden in shame. They would know that they were the product of careful planning, deep love, and the sacrifice of people who put the kingdom's needs above their own desires. When the story ended and her children were asleep, Isabella joined Prince Marcus on the balcony outside their bedroom. Together, they looked out over the kingdom that would someday belong to their sons. Do you ever regret learning the truth? Marcus asked, putting his arm around his wife. Isabella considered the question seriously. No, living with that secret was like carrying a weight I didn't even know I was bearing. Now that it's gone, I feel free to be completely myself. Our children will never have to wonder about their place in this family or in this kingdom, and they'll know that being royal means serving others, not just inheriting privilege. Isabella nodded. Mother's final gift to us wasn't just the documents that protected our claim to the throne. It was the example of how to face difficult truths with courage and dignity. In the distance, the palace bells chimed midnight, marking the end of another day in the kingdom of Eldoria. The royal family slept peacefully, knowing that their love for each other and their commitment to their people would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The crisis that had once threatened to tear them apart had instead revealed the true source of their strength. They were a family not because of shared blood, but because of shared values, mutual support, and an unshakable commitment to the people they served. Princess Isabella's whispered words in those first dark moments of discovery, "How do I tell the children?" had been answered not with a single conversation, but with a lifetime commitment to honesty, love, and the understanding that the strongest families are built on truth rather than secrets. As the kingdom slept, the future stretched ahead of them bright with possibility, built on the solid foundation of a family that had faced its deepest fears and emerged stronger, more united, and more committed to their calling than ever before.